Shoulder to shoulder, to quote Anthony Watson, we now answer Ireland's call for a video talking about them going into this Six Nations. In typical Squidge Hates Ireland fashion, we've left them until last. However,
Because you save the best till last, innit?
yeah, they are the defending champions. They've won it 2 years in a row. If they win it 3 years in a row, that would be a record for most outright titles won by any nation in the competition's history. Wales and France in past have both won 3 titles in a row, but in both cases there was a shared title amongst that because the before points difference came in. So you can make quabbles over that. It'd be the most outright titles anyone has ever won, would be 3 in a row for Ireland if they can do it this year.
That's the most consecutive.
Back-to-back titles.
And if we put ourselves in the shoes of people who've just watched them do that, you would have to say they completely deserve it, you know, for the way that they have. I don't want to go overboard and say like revolutionised attacking rugby or anything, but I think that they have near perfected what attacking rugby is at the moment in the sport, with their endless playbook, which is something that every team in theory could have, but they've got coaches and players who are intelligent enough and have the ingenuity to be able to pull these off. And not only that, but like they flawlessly execute these all the time. It's something that nobody really talks about. Everyone kind of goes like, oh, well, it's another set move from Ireland. It's like, well, every time they run one of these moves, like, you know, where it's usually from tap penalties or off line-outs and so on, that require people running different roles, unexpected roles, which Leinster in particular are evolving all the time and bringing in new ways to use positions that are traditionally used as, you know, let's say crash ball positions or whatever, right? They never screw those up because they've rehearsed them enough times that they have it genuinely flawless.
And because, again, we talked about this a bit in the video on Leinster's Academy, right the way down the pyramid to like under 12s, under 13s, players are being taught this is the way they play the game, you know? So that by the time they get up to international standard, they are so used to that. They use the terminology, use the calling systems. You look at, there was a clip of Dan Edwards, you know, in the Wales camp the other day, talking about the thing he struggled with most and stepping up. He was kind of like, session's okay, intensity okay, but it's having to learn an entire new vocabulary. For like, they call things different things, they call things in different ways. The players have different shapes. Ireland don't do that, right? So they've got this seamless transition up, and obviously that is more different players who come through Ulster or Munster or, you know, Connacht, who are still more similar to Leinster than the other two. But there is still an awful lot of continuity right through that, and that's been brought right the way from the top down, you know, and then built back up from the bottom right up to the top again. And it's a really smart system, and it's really working for them. And what they're getting now is the fruit of being smart, being massively ahead of the game in all areas. You know, it's not just on the field stuff. And you look at teams that have won Six Nations as in the past, it's generally because they've got things right on the field. Ireland's Six Nations success comes so much from what they did off the field as well. And the way they built that academy, and they built that structure, and they built a pool of players who, you talk about that attack, right? That attack doesn't work if you don't have, out of your, you know, 7 backs, at least 5 of them being proper ball players, you know? And pretty much that entire Irish back line, the first choice team, can organise an attack, can run things through, other than Gibson Park, who obviously has a very different role at scrum half. Everyone there is able to slot in and organise a phase, slot in and run a second wave if they need to.
And it's ironic you say
tens
that,
off their feet, they can play fly half.
Because like when Gibson Park moved out the wing against England last year, he was still doing that as well.
Still do that, yeah.
Like, it's not only that as well, but ball carriers in that. You know, you think about your James Lowe's, your Gary Ringroses, your Mac Hansons and so on. These are no slouches in contact, you know. It is proper all-round players who suit this system. And the reason why you can't quibble with that, you know, and I understand that there's frustrations with some of the people who are supporters of the other provinces, right? But it works. At Six Nations level, at the very least, it works. And granted, there will be a lot of largely South Africans in the comments saying they've not got past a quarter-final, you know, all of this, and that is correct. And maybe when it comes to World Cup qualification stuff, if they reach the point where they've won 3 Six Nations on the trot and they still can't get past a quarter-final, maybe they'll review that. But at Six Nations level in particular, like, you can't argue with it at all.
Yeah. However, one of the factors in their last World Cup run that did come to bite them on the arse a bit was the lack of rotation and the lack of building depth in that squad. And they have incredible depth in theory, but a lot of these players haven't had proper chance to prove it at top-end test matches. You know, you look at Craig Casey playing his annual game against Fiji and against Italy.
Yeah.
You know, he's played that. I forget what the stat is, but he's got 10 starts for Ireland and 8 of them against Italy or something ridiculous. But that has traditionally been, there's 1 or 2 fixtures a year where they change players and they bring players in. You know, Stuart McCloskey grafted in that one smallest autumn international for 8 years that eventually got his shot in the first team and did step up, right? But we haven't seen that chances given to players. And I wonder if this year, obviously the big factor with Ireland, the big talking point, is the fact that Andy Farrell is off on Lions duty. And so they are being coached instead by Simon Easterby. And I wonder whether one of the big questions is, has Farrell gone, this Six Nations is a free hit, I want you to experiment more. I want you to go and change the team up more and give more players a chance and perhaps, put Gavin Coombs at 10 or whatever his Munster fans want to happen. And just keep asking those questions going, can we extend the squad out? Because we've got 1 year where I'm not there and it's not on my head if things go badly. And this is the natural point in a World Cup cycle where you want to experiment a bit, you want to chuck that about.
100%.
Or has he gone to Simon Easterby, do exactly what I do? And that team has been picking itself for a few years. Will it just continue to be the case unless there's injuries?
It's such a good question. I, from an Irish perspective, hope they go for the developing depth a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, you say that thing about it's a free hit, if it fails, it falls on Easterby's head, right? It's not like the players that we're talking about rotating in aren't very good.
Exactly,
You use Craig Casey as an example.
It's not Wales, is it?
Exactly. He's out injured, of course, Craig Casey, which is such unfortunate timing because
is.
this felt like the campaign for him to have a go. I think the Fiji game in the autumn was so telling of where Craig Casey's at the moment because he had what I would say for his standards a really poor first half and then pulled through and had an excellent second half.
Was absolutely superb.
And really controlled the game. Yeah, and he really pulled it back. We'll obviously talk about Sam Prendergast a little bit.
But it's those games,
but
for
that's
both
what
those
makes a halfback.
Exactly. Those are the games he needs, to show him that he can get over making in the first 10 minutes. Because if you're playing against the Springboks, they put so much pressure on
it's inevitable.
Yeah, they're going to make you
charged down.
You've got to be able to pull through those periods.
Yeah.
And that is the most important thing, is giving them those situations.
100%.
Play that way in games of that intensity, at that speed and pressure. And he's a player who not just needs but also deserves those opportunities.
Yes.
And there's more and more of them throughout this Irish team. And obviously there's a lot of those Leinster players rather have played big European knockout games. A lot of those Munster players play big URC knockout games. A lot of the Ulster players, on the other hand, the likes of Cormac Ojukwu, who was superb in the autumn when he got a go, he hasn't had that much experience playing in huge knockout games.
Ojukwu was going to be the next name I mentioned because all those Leinster boys, we know they know how to win big games.
Yeah.
And
this isn't a knock at Ulster. It's just a fact of the matter that playing in the Champions Cup semi-final and final is a very different beast to playing against the Dragons on a Thursday night.
100%. And Ojukwu was a really good example because I could tell you just watching him, his level of physicality, his talent, his ball handling skills and everything, he would slot well into this Irish team. Into this system, he would play very well.
He is an international player.
He's an international level player. Yeah, definitely. And if you had a game where you rotated him in for, let's say, Jack Conan or Peter O'Mahony or Josh van der Fleer, whoever, right? Just one game where he's playing with the other 14 lads that pick themselves, as you said earlier, right? He would not play any worse, than the lads who would take his place regardless, right? And I think that this Six Nations, Simon Easterby, has 5 opportunities to do that to a player. Probably to 2 or 3 players, actually, because you've also got the bench that you can do that with. And if you've got 13 of your normal team, you can beat most of the teams. Granted, France, you probably want to go all guns
France
blazing.
is the one exception. And that is at home, so they've got a big chance to win it. Because if they win that, then providing they remain focused in the other games, they should have enough to get through.
However, part of the reason that makes me doubt that this is the route they're going to go down, and I hope to be proven wrong on this, is that they have parachuted back into the squad James Lowe and Dan Sheehan both together. Now, James Lowe got injured at the end of the last autumn campaign, just gone, has been rehabbing for the last month or 2, and he's got straight back into the Ireland squad there. Now, a lot of people have quibbles with that, going how do we know he's going to be on form? He's not played for his club and so on. I don't really care about that because he's James Lowe. He's a world-class rugby player.
And also, he's never been fast. Yeah. The physical attributes of his game are not his strengths. Yeah. It's the fact he reads the game. As I was talking about players that are able to hop in and run that system. right? It's so much easier to bring back James Lowe, even if he is out of form or he hasn't played or whatever, and get him to just do the job that we know he can do, than to teach another player to do it, right? And Calvin Nash came in and did a very good job last season because that is his natural game. He plays the ball more, he likes to play out the boot, and he almost does play as like an extra ball player from the wing rather than from a fullback.
Much like Mac Hansen.
Yeah, Mac Hansen does that, James Lowe does that. You are limited in the wingers who can do that. That is not Jacob Stockdale's natural game. And they have at points tried to make him play that way that fits with the Andy Farrell system, and it hasn't worked.
Yes.
And so you then start to dip into wingers who either are learning that game still, playing at Leinster, or that's just not their natural game at all. And they're not used to doing that, right? And it is easier to bring James Lowe in and go, we know we can run our system comfortably. And also, exiting, they kick so much off James Lowe's left boot, and that is such a huge part of their game, is just him thundering the ball downfield.
Yeah.
And so that becomes critical to their game. It's so much easier to go, yeah, let's bring Lowe in, than to teach someone else to play the James Lowe role, someone who might be in better form. You've then got to take them away from playing their natural game as well. And it becomes that classic thing, right? If people like to view their national team as the best players from that nation on the best form at that moment, but so often it's just trying to get the players that best fit the game plan that the coach wants to put in place.
100%.
And James Lowe will pretty much always be that whilst Andy Farrell's in charge, or Simon Easterby's in charge, assuming he's going to play the same way.
From that perspective, James Lowe's probably the first name on the team sheet.
He's up
because his skill set is so unique to his position, you know? And that's why I want to tie us back into the first point about creating depth. Because let's say 2027 Rugby World Cup, James Lowe goes down injured in the first pool game. What the hell do they do? Their game plan's fallen apart. They've not got this big left boot. They've not got this extra 10 who manages the game, who's wearing number 11, who finishes tries, is really strong, is defensively really, really strong, right? What do they do in that scenario? And this is why I think this is a really important campaign, because I think it's great that James Lowe's in the squad, but I think they shouldn't parachute him straight into the starting team. They should give him some time, not because he needs to get fit, because I'm sure he's fit enough. I'm sure he'll be just fine himself. I think they need to develop another option who could play that. And now I'm pretty sure I know the direction they're going to do if they do that. And that is the last 2 European games that have gone on, Leinster have selected Jamie Osborne on the left wing. Yeah. Now, Jamie Osborne, prior to those 2 European back-to-back weeks, he'd played on the wing twice for Leinster before. Once last season, once the season before. So he only really plays there if they need a bit of cover there or they've got too many centres playing. Like in the second of those games, they had Gary Ringrose on the other wing. So they had essentially 4 centres playing, right? But Jamie Osborne, whilst he's a very different player to James Lowe, you can definitely mould him to be the second James Lowe if he's injured in the game plan, in the context of the shape they like to play. And it means you don't lose Bundy Archie, you don't lose Robbie Henshaw, you don't lose Gary Ringrose.
And you look at the core attributes of Jamie Osborne, right?
Yeah.
Huge boot.
Huge left boot is the most important bit.
Yeah.
Is that he's left-footed. His left boot is absolutely huge, and they use that to relieve pressure. Yeah. Right? Which is James Lowe's most important role.
We saw him last year during the summer tour, where he came in, and as a raw fullback, he was quite up and down. He got caught out of position a couple of times, dropped a ball. But if you isolate that down to how he worked as a fullback within the Irish system, rather than as a fullback in general, he slotted in flawlessly.
Exactly.
Like he managed to run that role that Keenan runs so brilliantly, where he essentially works as a boot runner that becomes a strike runner.
Yeah.
You know, you so often see him float out the back and then turn and adapt and straighten up the line, whilst also being able to organise a line, then float out and become an extra runner alongside it and adapt his role. And he ran that role beautifully. And that says to me, you know, and we already knew this from the amount of positions he's played for Leinster. He's covered in every different position and so on. I think he's played everywhere in the back line for them other than 10.
Other than 10, 9.
And 9, obviously, yeah. But it shows what an adaptable player is, what a coachable player he is. And he has the raw skill set to fill in and play that James Lowe role on the wing, where he can come in and organise a second wave of attack, where he can call out the boot, where he can organise things and run things himself if the 10 is off on the ground out the game.
Whilst still recognising...
doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, while still recognising when to hold your width, you know, because he's got the strength to finish tries. He's got the speed to finish tries.
The question.
He covers the backfield brilliantly.
That becomes the one thing we don't know about is his raw positioning on the wing, particularly offensively. Does he hold his depth well? Does he keep his width when he needs to? Does he stay out wide?
Because James Lowe does all of the above.
Yeah.
You know,
because
he really
understands
picks his
that
moments.
positioning.
And he understands Gibson Park, he understands Dan Sheehan, like the players that they typically mould him around, you know. That is another important part about James Lowe, the fact they bring him off the wing so much, is with Dan Sheehan, they essentially use him as their extra winger.
Yes.
When James Lowe is in field, they'll just stick Dan Sheehan on the wing and just go, well, he's obviously rapid. He knows the wing position inside out. You know, if he wants to cross fields, if he wants a long pass going his way, he knows how to burst onto the ball in a way that not many non-wingers do, you know? And so those two are kind of, interchangeable is not quite the word, you know, but they can fill each other's roles a little bit. Or rather, James Lowe slots into 10 or centre, somebody else will do a bit more carrying like a hooker would, and Dan Sheehan slides out to the wing. And it just really balances their workload really nicely.
Yeah, and Dan Sheehan is the one that I do have a question mark over, because Lowe was supposed to take about this time, and he's back maybe a week or two ahead of schedule and making the Six Nations. That happens all the time. You know, you see players all the time. The stories about Dan Liddy getting up and icing his knee at like every 3 hours, not sleeping and all of that in order to be fit for the quarterfinal. All of those stories, they happen, right? That's fine. Dan Sheehan was supposed to be out until August.
Yeah.
Like, he was supposed to be out for months and months beyond this. And I don't know the case. I don't know the situation. I trust the medical team that's taken care of him and got him through this.
As a Lions fan, great news.
Yeah. But I think about, I've seen it so many times where Alan Wynne and Sam Warburton both did this a lot, where they would rush themselves back for Six Nations, play those 5 games, and then they wouldn't be able to walk for the rest of the season.
Especially
they then miss the second half of the season.
And there's research that's been done into this, I hate to speculate about this, that when people come back from an ACL injury, the main injury they do is the other ACL.
Yeah.
Because, like, there is some, I'm not a sports scientist, but it's a thing with hamstrings and ACLs that essentially if you train one of them, when you're sprinting at full speed, the other one's trying to accommodate by trying to run as fast as the one that actually can go at that speed, you know? And so it just pulls up, you know?
Yeah.
And I really am praying that Dan Sheehan is fit to play in this, or that they're having him around the camp so that he can teach his role. If we're saying James Lowe's doing that to Jamie Osborne, that he's doing the same things to Gus McCarthy.
He is in the formal squad, which is the question mark around it, rather than being like Talupa Faletau being brought in, not to keep using Wales examples, but Faletau brought in Wales to do that with the, you know, less senior players. That is the question mark. And again, I don't want to speculate. I trust the medical team have done their job, but you wonder whether Dan Sheehan has rushed himself back in order to play in the Six Nations, knowing there's a Lions tour coming up.
Sure.
And this might not be the best thing for his long-term health.
Yeah.
However, he is a critical part of how Ireland play. And so if you are Simon Easterby, you probably are very tempted to bring him in, because he allows you, as you said, that wing option, that extra winger that he can play. In a way, there's lots of hookers who are great edge forwards, but very few of them work as a winger in the way he does.
Yeah, like the technicalities of like kick chase and defence and so on. Yeah. He's absolutely superb.
And that is, you know, part of the big question. The other side of the selection debate is fly half.
Yeah.
Now, this is the big controversial one, and I kind of love it. I kind of love we've got this big, like, old school fly half debate, and not in the way that, you know, Scotland have no idea who their second choice fly half is. That's not the same. Wales have no idea who their fly half is for very different reasons. Ireland have 2 contenders, one from Leinster, one from Munster, very different backgrounds, very different kind of fan bases behind them, going head to head. And I love that. I think it's really good always for the sport, for the game, to have these 2 complete contrasting, not different personalities necessarily, but like different figures. You've got like...
I don't love the discourse. I love that it exists.
You've got Jack Crowley, the people's champ from, you know, from down in Munster. And then you've got like the guy who was groomed to be the next great thing.
Yeah.
Everything going for him, going back through history, you know, like the Archduke himself, Sam Prendergast, in the other corner. You know, red versus blue. I love it.
Yeah.
I think at the minute, and this is not a particularly hot take, Jack Crowley is the best fly half in Ireland.
Yeah.
I think Sam Prendergast has the highest ceiling for any fly half in Ireland.
Yes, I agree.
And this becomes the core of the debate, is do you go, Sam Prendergast can be the best fly half in Ireland inside 18 months.
And so he is test level already.
Yeah, he is. He is. So,
sorry.
Do you want a stat?
Go on.
Sam Prendergast has assisted more line breaks than any other player in Europe this season.
Wow.
Antoine Dupont is second.
Is shit hot in Europe.
Yeah.
Like, again, same old saying about the Fiji game. there's been a lot of games where he's made errors and then he's come back in the second half and done something brilliant, or a few things that are brilliant. I would like to just insert that Rio Ferdinand clip where he's just there like, why can't we just enjoy them both? You know, when you're supporting the Irish national team, just enjoy the fact you've got two really, really good fly halves here. The thing that annoys me is there are some people who get petty about this and go like, almost want Ireland to lose if the one not from their province is playing at 10, like to prove a point, you know?
This is where Connacht fans come in, because they just go, we're just very happy for Bunty.
Yeah, Bunty's great. Fair play to you, lads. And like, Cian Prendergast gets some time as well. Good for him.
For me, the core difference between the two fly halves is on how they play the game. Jack Crowley, for me, is a game management guy. His whole thing is he loves to think about the game as a holistic whole. He's looking at putting kicks in behind. He's looking at weighing up overall tactics. He's looking at how the opposition are aligning. Sam Prendergast, on the other hand, is a space management guy. And what he's looking to do is get the ball into areas where there is the most space. Hence why he's made more line break assists than any other player in Europe this season. One above Antoine Dupont, which is the huge statement in itself. So he's always looking for where is the space on the field, where Crowley is thinking, how are the opposition going to react to this? It's very much just comes down to how do the two players approach thinking about rugby. And the two of them work beautifully together. And I think in some ways, this isn't a statement on Jack Crowley being worse, but what Crowley brings you is more valuable in the last 20 minutes of the game, where what Prendergast brings you is more valuable in the first 20 minutes of a game. So you kind of have that middle quarter where both are equally valuable, but if you can get off to a flying start because you've got someone putting players into space, that is worth its weight in gold. Where if you've got a fly half at the end who is managing the conditions beautifully, who is hanging it in the air if the opposition wing is not getting back quickly enough.
Who is always thinking, clutch.
Who loves a drop goal, who loves, you know, taking that moment, if there is one on offer, for him to be the hero and to step up.
Think about the Australia game in the autumn. How that works with Crowley coming off the bench.
The other thing about Jack Crowley is you look at that Australia game in the autumn, and there are a lot of fly halves who could come on and do one thing or the other. Crowley has an equally strong kicking and attacking game, and he was able to look at that game and go, okay, what this needs from my position on the bench is someone to come on and kick the lever off it, because Australia are defending incredibly high, they're putting a lot of pressure on, and they're using their wingers to shoot up and cut off space. So what I'm going to do is put it in behind them and keep applying pressure and keep pressuring them and not allowing them to play out of anything other than their own 22, where Prendergast wouldn't have done that. But equally, if the game was the other way around and Australia were kicking everything, he could sit back and go, okay, what we need is to run and pass. And his game is equally good at that. But that is his core strength, is his ability to weigh that up and think on that.
It's so interesting because I love this as a debate. The attacking fly half to start for 60 minutes and game manager to come off the bench versus game managing fly half for 60 minutes, then you bring on your game breaker who will crack open an unbreakable defence for the first 60 minutes in the last 20, you know. I love that because I don't think there is a correct answer to which one is the better way round. It is, as you say, it's dependent on your team. I do think that, and people might hate me for saying this, but with the whole thing of the familiarity of Leinster's system, right, I think that will really suit Sam Prendergast.
Agreed.
You know, is the players that will play around him, knowing exactly what patterns they like to run, right? And then the opposition is still in the game with 20 minutes, 30 minutes even to go. Guess what? You've got a fly-off who's just as good, if not better, probably is better, certainly at this moment in time. You can bring on who will increase your chances of winning that game. It's it's a blessing that they have those two fly halves specifically who are at that level at the moment, who are so competitive, presumably with each other. I hear by all accounts they get on very well, which a lot of Munster United fans will probably hate to hear. but that's such a blessing for Ireland. You've got to enjoy them both.
We talk about the quarterfinal curse, right? And it's more relevant, this might come down to the last 10 minutes against England or France or someone. But that quarterfinal game against New Zealand in the previous World Cup, Ireland had that incredible last, 40-odd phases of possession before Sam Whitelock wins the turnover. And in that period, Johnny Sexton had played, at least 60 minutes in every game they played that campaign.
Age 39.
Age 39. He was really getting on, and he was visibly knackered. And he says in this very book, that he was tired by that point, but he felt he could see the game out. And
if there was a pop star there to feed him like a breakfast food in the middle of the game, that would have really helped.
Been really beneficial.
Sorry, I don't know why that came to my head. Something must have inspired me. Carry on.
Yeah.
Sorry,
That's where
sorry.
Sabrina
I
Carpenter
digress.
parachutes onto the field.
Yes, I digress.
Just gives him Weetabix.
Yes.
And suddenly he runs 15 metres and scores.
That's going to be part of her next stage show, knowing her. Anyway, carry on.
So the part of this issue is they didn't have that guy to come off the bench. And I think actually that axis of having two really good fly halves, both equally capable of playing at this level. Crowley's still young as well. He's still only 25. Like, he's not yet in the prime of his career. Allows Ireland to make those changes, and it probably adds more dynamism to that attack in the last play if we get into that situation somewhere. And that is really exciting, because our opening game against England, I think it's going to be an incredibly tough encounter. England are going to come really fired up, really come out the gates. There's a bit in the preview that went up a few days ago where I talk a bit about the Irish attack and how it's changed a bit under Andrew Goodman, who, again, was the Leinster attack coach, did a perfectly good job with Leinster, after Felipe Contepomi left, had been skills coach there before. However, their attack has not been as lethal in the autumn as it was before that.
I think I would go Crowley for England.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a dogfight regardless.
I think so.
And then when you get to France, you maybe switch it up and put Prendergast in.
I think it becomes a horses for courses situation.
It does, doesn't it? Man, this is so good. I so wish the team I supported had this dilemma.
I know. Remember Bigger and Anscombe?
Oh,
that was good.
Yeah. Anyway, carry on.
But yeah, so that England game I think is, as you said, going to be a dogfight. I think that's going to be incredibly tight, and that's really exciting as a prospect, because Ireland are going to be pulled into a game that is not necessarily the one they want to be playing, similar to that All Blacks game, where the All Blacks really shut them down. And again, there's more detail in that main preview over on the main channel, but the main difference with the Andrew Goodman approach is they are playing much deeper than they were under Mike Catt. And, the width between the fly half and the furthest back player and the boot is so much wider. There's so much more distance there, and it is giving teams more time to push off. However, it is also allowing them to have more runners coming off places and able to give more intricate passes. And so I can understand the logic of both approaches, but I feel like it has allowed teams to figure them out a little bit more. Just like it's one of these things. It's just like how Goodman thinks about the game, as he likes depth. It's a very Kiwi rugby thing, I think, in being a New Zealander rather than an English man, as Mike Catt was and continues to be. Unless he is an English cat, in which case that was an incredibly impressive achievement. I'm glad he managed to hide it for so long. He had claws and yet could catch a ball. Over his 30-year international career. Perhaps explain why he couldn't tackle John Lomri, though, that he was just he was a cat. And have you ever seen a cat make a comprehensive tackle? They can't really get their shoulders in position like he couldn't against John Lomri. That isn't relevant at all. But the point only being that Ireland's attack has become easier to defend, I think. And there are individual strike moves now that are much stronger. But you are seeing teams start to shift out, just drift, just push off, and allow themselves to cover up to the wing. And
as long as you're more than 5 metres out from the try line.
Yeah.
They are defendable for at least a couple of phases.
Oh, on the try line, they're the most deadly team in the world.
Yeah.
But England's defence being so aggressive, I think they can combine that kind of drifting approach with just being able to blitz out a line and catch them out.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, actually? I didn't think about this until just now. A lot of teams, you say that thing of they're more deadly from 22 metres out than 5. Doesn't apply to Ireland.
Yeah.
It's interesting, that, isn't it? It probably is because of them revolutionising the tap penalty move.
Yeah, and no team goes off the top in the line out 5 metres out more often than Ireland, and no team plays out the back more often.
Because all options are genuinely on with them. There's so much they can pull out the bag at any given point.
They're so hard to predict.
Yeah.
And that's why actually I think England's hammer defence is so good for targeting them. Yeah. And if you can get one shot in, and you look at it happens a few times.
High risk, high reward, isn't it?
Particularly against Japan, where they would sometimes end up by absolutely smoking them in the wide channels, and sometimes just one, slight home would fall off a tackle or something, and suddenly, bam, they were 40 metres upfield, and that's probably what this Ireland test is going to be a bit like. It's going to come down to how well they can get outside the English defence, I think, rather than necessarily round it and through it in ways they have in past years.
So, final question then. Where do you see this Irish team coming this year in the Six Nations? Are they looking at the third consecutive Six Nations? Are they even touching a Grand Slam? If not, why not? And if so, why?
Second, because Antoine Dupont exists.
Okay.
I think that game in Dublin is the key. I can see Ireland winning it. I wouldn't be, if anyone had Ireland as favourites, I wouldn't argue too much. But I just think this French team looks so complete.
I reckon.
And with Untermac and Dupont back in,
yeah,
that makes such a huge difference. The team they overcame last year was missing a lot of their best players, and they beat what is the core of France really comprehensively.
Yeah.
Once you have that core, but you sprinkle in the game breakers, right? Like Ireland could probably still score as many points past France as they did last year, but France with, Rameau at fullback, with Untermac at 10, with Dupont particularly at 9, and with Penaud, who obviously did play and score last year, but on one wing in this kind of form, and Biel Barry on the other wing, suddenly France have probably got 4 more tries in them.
I reckon that game will come down to Ireland are the better team and lose it in the last 10 minutes by a couple of points. Yeah. And France will count their stars very lucky.
Where do you see Ireland finishing?
I think, same as you, I think they'll come second. As I say, that game I think will literally be flip of a coin.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, I think they will look like themselves. I really hope they look like themselves whilst rotating players in and developing a bit of depth ahead of the World Cup, because they will need it. They can't coast to a semi-final or a final or a World Cup trophy on 15 players.
Yeah.
That no team in the world is good enough to do that. And as much as I love this Irish team and the way they play, I think it would be arrogant if they never tried to experiment with that.
Yeah.
And they have enough good players that aren't even in the squad, let alone the ones that are, that they need to give a genuine go, not off the bench. A genuine go in a pressurised test.
Agreed, completely. So France is the big game for them and the big test. England, I think, is a banana skin. I can see them losing to England. I think the England team are good enough to do it again and do it away in Dublin. However, I think Ireland should be favourites and should expect to win that game, but I can see England beating them. I think this England team is much better than a lot of people give credit for, as we talked about in the preview on them. I then ask the question of, should they be worried about Scotland? Because their record over Scotland, they haven't lost them in, I think, 10 years now, and they've got an incredible record against them.
Sleeping Giant comes to mind.
Yeah, but is this going to be the game where in past Scotland have really targeted the England game? Is this going to be the year that instead they go after Ireland? I don't know. And then the other thing is, should they be worried about Italy and Wales?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on those 3 fixtures? Should Ireland be concerned at all? Is there a world in which they can lose to them?
Wales, no, I don't think so.
Wales being in Cardiff mid-tournament is an interesting one.
It is, but I think Ireland could beat them on autopilot.
If Wales beat Italy the week before that, or the round before that, because there's a break week in the middle, I think it's possible, but I think that's the odds going from 2% to 12%.
I don't see it with Wales. Italy's an interesting one.
I would give generally Wales a 3 or 4% chance of beating Ireland. If they win the week before, that goes up by maybe.
Bear in mind, last year Italy had their best Six Nations ever so far, and they lost 36-0. Yeah, away in Ireland. This time, I think they'll give him more of a game, but it won't be losing bonus point range just yet. I think they'll come a step closer to that, but I don't think they'll beat him.
I think it would be a great result for Italy if they get a losing bonus point.
I think Scotland always give them a game in a way that you don't expect them to.
And then fall apart in the last
And then fall apart. And I think exactly the same thing's going to happen this year.
That's what I suspect, especially it'll be in Dublin, won't it? No, sorry, it'll be in Murrayfield, yeah. So that does change things if that's the game they go after, with the England game being at Twickenham. But yeah, I would expect Ireland should be able to say sleepwalk past Wales. They should be able to beat Italy comfortably. They should beat Scotland. And then England, if they are switched on, or if England aren't 100%, they win that. France is the big game. So
we're saying probably second for Ireland, could be first. We'll see. There's potential banana skins there. So firstly, thank you for watching the 6 episodes of this
series.
This has been great fun to do. Well, we've been supporting all 6 teams at certain points, I think, in this. However, I do understand if you're extremely upset about the fact you can't see anything with Michael Stipe feeding porridge to Ronan O'Gara in there, that we've deliberately left out because of our hatred towards Munster Rugby Club, then you can send your hate mail to... Well, you can just go to israelfolau.com.
israelfolau.com.
Yeah. And
that directs us back to us, though.
Yeah, okay. Send it to @izzyfolau in that case.